The wind's trying to peel the shingles off the roof like they're stubborn banana skins, and I'm up here, legs splayed, looking like a spread-eagled starfish clinging to a particularly unstable rock. Below me, our street is already starting to look less like a street and more like a badly planned canal system. Hurricane Zephyr, a Category 4 meteorological middle finger, is making its grand entrance. And my main thought isn't about the integrity of my roof trusses. No, my main thought is, Brenda is going to get us all killed. "This is it, Sarah!" I roar over the wind, which promptly tries to steal the words from my mouth and hurl them into the next county. My wife, Sarah, is down in the driveway, a beacon of surreal calm in her bright pink rain boots, methodically loading cases of what she calls artisanal hydration. It's water, folks, just very expensive water, into the back of our minivan. "That's what you said when that flock of Canada geese tried to annex Mr. Henderson's bird bath last spring, Mikey," she hollers back, not missing a beat. "They were organized, Sarah," I bellow, grabbing for a rogue gutter that's decided it wants to become a javelin. "They had formations. They were clearly establishing a beachhead." This, however, is different. This isn't a territorial dispute with overly ambitious waterfowl. This is Zephyr. And Zephyr, I can tell you with the certainty of a man whose left knee currently feels like it's auditioning for a heavy metal drum solo, is playing for keeps. But Zephyr, as terrifying as she is, isn't my biggest problem. My biggest problem is 5'4", wields a clipboard like a battle axe, and goes by the name of Brenda, our HOA president. Let me paint you a picture of Sunny Pines. It's your classic Floridian suburb. Tidy lawns, houses painted in various shades of beige that Brenda personally approves. She once sent a cease and desist because Mrs. Albright's mailbox was a shade too exuberant, and a general air of forced tranquility. The only fly in our ointment, the only wrinkle in our perfectly pressed khaki existence, is that Sunny Pines was apparently constructed on what a geologist friend of mine once described, with a worried frown, as a geologically ambitious swamp. Translation: if a butterfly flaps its wings too hard in Brazil, our storm drains start to sweat. Our sole defense against returning to our amphibious roots is a hulking, diesel-powered behemoth, lovingly, by me anyway, nicknamed Bessie. The Sunny Pines Community Flood Control Pump Station, Alpha 7. She's a concrete cube of pure, unadulterated pumping power, and most years, she slumbers peacefully. But when the skies turn mean, Bessie is the only thing standing between our living rooms and impromptu koi ponds. And then there's Brenda. Brenda believes rules are not just guidelines, they are sacred texts, handed down from on high, presumably from a celestial HOA board where everything is perfectly beige, and dissent is punishable by mandatory attendance at a 5-hour seminar on sprinkler maintenance. She once tried to fine me because my garden gnomes, a charming collection of slightly tipsy-looking fellows I'd inherited from my Uncle Phil, were not, and I quote, thematically consistent with approved autumnal decor guidelines as outlined in Addendum 7, subsection C, paragraph 2. We live in South Florida. Our seasons are hot, hotter, and hurricane. Autumnal decor usually involves boarding up your windows and wondering if your flood insurance is paid up. "This time it's real," I tell Sarah later, toweling off after my rooftop wrestling match. I'm mainlining coffee and staring at the weather map, which looks like a giant, angry blueberry scone is about to collide with our coastline. I can feel it in my surgically repaired C5, C6 vertebrae. They're humming a sea shanty. Sarah just pours herself another cup of artisanal water. "Your vertebrae also hummed when you ate that entire deep-fried Snickers at the state fair, Mikey. Try to stay calm." Calm. Right. That's easy for her to say. She doesn't know about Brenda's latest power play. Not yet. The day before, landfall is a blur of frantic preparation. I'm less concerned with the wind and more with the water. Wind you can hide from. Water? Water has an insidiously patient way of finding you, no matter where you are. My main focus, Bessie. I find Mr. Henderson, my 80-year-old neighbor who still climbs onto his own roof to clear his gutters, and occasionally to shout at squirrels he believes are plotting against him. Already at the pump house, he's giving Bessie's thick steel door a reassuring pat. "Mornin', Mikey," he says, his voice raspy but strong. "Think she'll hold against this new fella, Zephyr?" "She always has, Mr. H," I reply, trying to project a confidence I don't entirely feel. "Just gotta make sure she's got the juice, and, more importantly, that we've got the keys to give her that juice." And that's where the cold dread begins its icy crawl up my spine. The lockbox. A standard HOA issue metal box bolted to the concrete wall next to Bessie's door. The combination, for years, has been a ridiculously simple 1, 2, 3, 4. Brenda's idea of robust yet easily memorable security measures. I punch in 1, 2, 3, 4. The tumblers don't tumble. The lock doesn't click. Nothing. My heart does a little stutter step. "That's odd," I mutter. Mr. Henderson frowns. "You sure you got it right, son? My memory ain't what it used to be, but even I remember that one." I try again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Denied. My stomach clenches. Cue the flashback. It's always a flashback with Brenda, isn't it? Last month's HOA meeting. The air in the community clubhouse was thick with the scent of stale coffee and simmering resentment. Brenda, resplendent in a power suit the color of oatmeal, was at the makeshift podium, 2 stacked card tables and a microphone that screeched like a tortured banshee every time she got too close. "Effective immediately," she'd announced, her voice radiating the kind of smug self-importance that could power a small city. "For enhanced security and operational integrity regarding the flood control pump station Alpha 7, all access protocols are being revised." She'd paused for dramatic effect, peering at us over the top of her glasses, which were, I kid you not, attached to a chain adorned with tiny, alarmingly sharp plastic seashells. "A new, highly secure key management system will be implemented. Details will be disseminated on a strict need-to-know basis." My hand had shot up. "Brenda," I'd said, trying to keep the sarcasm from dripping too obviously from my voice. "Does need to know include the handful of us who actually know how to operate the pump, when, for instance, the neighborhood is actively transforming into a new tributary for the Everglades?" Brenda had fixed me with a glare that could strip paint. "The designated flood response coordinator will manage all key access and operational procedures, Michael. That coordinator is me." A ripple of uneasy murmurs had gone through the room. Even Mrs. Periwinkle, who usually agreed with Brenda on principle just to avoid being assigned to the dreaded Petunia Bedweeding Committee, looked a bit green. "And what if you're, say, on one of your quilting cruises to Alaska when the flood hits, Brenda?" I'd pressed. "I have deputies," she'd sniffed, as if that settled the matter. Her deputies, as far as anyone could tell, were her long-suffering husband, Harold, who seemed to communicate exclusively through pained sighs, and her miniature poodle, Prince Fluffybutt, who, to be fair, did possess a certain regal air, if also a penchant for yapping at lawnmowers. Back in the present, the rain is starting to fall in fat, splattering drops. The wind is picking up, carrying the scent of ozone and impending doom. Panic, cold and sharp, is a fishhook in my gut. I pull out my phone, fingers fumbling. Straight to Brenda's voicemail, a pre-recorded message that sounds like a hostage negotiator trying to reason with a particularly stubborn houseplant. "Brenda, it's Mikey. We need to talk about Bessie's keys, like 5 minutes ago. The fate of our collective property values may depend on it." I hang up. a hollow feeling in my chest. Sarah finds me staring blankly at the locked pump house, rainwater already starting to pool around my sneakers. "What is it now?" she asks, her voice laced with that familiar blend of concern and, oh God, what has he gotten us into this time? Did the gnomes declare full-scale war and demand political asylum? "Worse, Sarah," I say, my voice grim. "Brenda's gone full keymaster. She's changed the locks on our salvation, and I don't think she's looking for the gatekeeper." The hours leading up to Zephyr's full fury are a masterclass in escalating anxiety. The sky is a churning, malevolent gray. The news channels have switched from concerned warnings to graphic depictions of impending watery Armageddon. Evacuation orders for low-lying coastal areas are blaring from every TV and radio. We're not technically coastal, but as I've mentioned, Sunny Pines has an unfortunate tendency to think it's Venice if it rains too hard for more than 10 minutes. And through it all, there's Brenda. I spot her from my kitchen window. While the rest of us are frantically boarding up windows, hauling patio furniture indoors, and making desperate calls to our insurance agents, Brenda is measuring. She's out there in the whipping wind, a bright yellow rain slicker making her look like a particularly officious traffic cone, armed with a clipboard and a retractable measuring tape. She's meticulously checking the precise distance between Mrs. Albright's prize-winning and now violently trembling hibiscus bushes and the official property line marker. This woman, I swear, would stop to issue a parking ticket during the actual apocalypse. I can't take it anymore. I march out there, the wind trying to rip my own raincoat off my back. "Brenda!" I yell, struggling to be heard over the roar. "Hurricane, imminent flooding, pump, keys. Are any of these concepts currently registering in your operational matrix?" She turns slowly, with the air of someone being interrupted during vital, world-saving calculations. "Michael," she says, her voice tight with disapproval. "I have the situation entirely under control. The Sunny Pines HOA Emergency Flood Preparedness Manual, Revised Edition 7.3, subsection B, paragraph 4, clearly states that pump activation is to be initiated only upon visual confirmation of Brenda. I cut her off, my patience wearing thinner than my rapidly eroding sanity. The only manual we're going to need in about 2 hours is one on how to build a functional raft out of recycled pool noodles and existential dread. We need those keys, now! She actually pats her fanny pack, which, I notice with a fresh wave of horror, also appears to be laminated. "The keys are secure, Michael. My system is flawless. All contingency plans are robustly implemented and procedurally sound." A few other brave, or perhaps just desperate, souls from the neighborhood have gathered. Old Man Henderson is there, his face a thundercloud that rivals the one brewing overhead. The young Miller couple, who just bought the Peterson place and still have that fresh-faced, isn't suburban life charming glow, it's fading fast, are looking increasingly terrified. "Brenda, please," pleads Mrs. Miller, her voice trembling. "Our basement. It's already taking on water from the lawn sprinklers you insisted we run for an extra hour yesterday for optimal pre-storm soil saturation." Brenda just gives them her patented condescending smile, the one that says, "You poor, uninformed peasant, if only you understood the intricate beauty of my bureaucratic genius." She dismisses them with a flurry of HOA buzzwords that sound impressive but mean absolutely nothing. Rest assured, the board is proactively monitoring all relevant meteorological data and will deploy assets as per the established and ratified emergency action framework. The board, by the way, is Brenda, and Harold, who I'm pretty sure just signs whatever she puts in front of him in exchange for being allowed to watch his golf tournaments in peace. My internal monologue is now a frantic, screaming gibberish. This woman thinks robust contingency plan means having an extra set of batteries for her label maker and a color-coded system for her Tupperware lids. We are all going to drown in a sea of her misplaced confidence. I trudge back inside, defeated for the moment. Sarah looks at me, her eyebrows raised. Well? She's robustly implementing procedurally sound contingency plans, honey, I say, my voice flat. Which, as far as I can tell, means she's going to let us all develop gills before she admits her system has a flaw the size of a Category 5 hurricane. Sarah sighs, a long, weary sound. She can't be that unreasonable, can she? Surely when the water starts actually coming into her house. I shake my head, a grim certainty settling in my stomach. Sarah, my love, you underestimate the awesome, terrifying power of a true believer armed with a laminated flowchart and an unshakable conviction in her own infallibility. Brenda wouldn't admit she was wrong if the floodwaters were lapping at her chin and a chorus of angels was singing, "Brenda, you're wrong." She'd just tell them their halos weren't HOA approved. I go to my emergency stash. Generator fuel, check. First aid kit bigger than a small suitcase, check. Inflatable alligator pool toy I won at a carnival that Sarah keeps trying to accidentally deflate. Double check. Desperate times, desperate measures. My mind starts a frantic inventory of my questionable life skills. Can I pick a commercial-grade, reinforced steel padlock in the middle of a hurricane with only a paperclip and sheer willpower? Unlikely. Can I hotwire a multi-ton industrial diesel flood pump without giving myself a hairdo that would make Einstein jealous? Even more unlikely. This, I realize with a sinking heart, is going to be very, very bad. The first fat drops of Zephyr's wrath are a deceptive prelude. 1 minute, it's just angry spitting. The next, the sky rips open like a rotten seam, and a solid gray sheet of water slams into sunny pines. It's not rain, it's an ocean tipped sideways. The wind doesn't howl, it screams, a raw, primal fury that rattles the windows in their frames and makes the palm trees in my front yard bend over like they're desperately trying to touch their toes. Okay, little Hummer. That could, I mutter in the garage, giving my generator a reassuring pat as it coughs, sputters, then roars to life, casting a pool of steady, defiant light. Time to earn your keep. The house lights flicker one last time, hold for a poignant, dramatic beat, then surrender to the storm with a sad little foot. Outside, the world is a maelstrom of wind and water. Sarah has Lily at the kitchen table, a fortress of flashlights and coloring books between them. Lily is meticulously drawing a rainbow-colored unicorn, apparently surfing on a tidal wave. Bless her 7-year-old heart. She has inherited her mother's preternatural calm in the face of impending doom. Or maybe she just really likes unicorns. My phone, which I've wisely encased in 3 Ziploc bags, starts buzzing like an angry hornet. It's the Sunny Pines Disaster Network, our unsanctioned, highly unofficial neighborhood WhatsApp group, usually reserved for complaining about Brenda's latest edicts or organizing rogue garage sales. Tonight, it's a digital lifeline of pure, unadulterated panic. Mr. Henderson, water's halfway up my driveway. Pump isn't on. I repeat, pump is silent. Where is that woman and her infernal fanny pack? Miller, new guy, bless his naive heart. Guys? Is the retention pond supposed to be in my living room? Also, are azaleas generally submersible? Asking for a friend. Random neighbor whose name I can never remember. I saw Brenda. I swear to God, I saw her near the pump house. I think she was trying to laminate something in the middle of the hurricane. Laminating. Of course. Because what's a little Category 4 wind and rain when there are vital documents to be protected by a thin film of plastic? I'm already pulling on my brightest yellow rain slicker. It makes me look like a slightly deranged, oversized banana, but damn it, it's waterproof. Flashlight gripped like a lightsaber, I plunge out into the aquatic nightmare that was once my front yard. The water is already a churning, angry soup swirling around my ankles, trying to suck my sneakers off my feet. And there she is, Brenda. A lone, defiant figure silhouetted against the gray concrete of Bessie's pump house. She's under a ridiculously inadequate golf umbrella, which is bucking and rearing like a wild stallion. And yes, unbelievably, she is attempting to feed a sheet of paper into a small, handheld, battery-operated laminator. The paper, I can just make out through the driving rain, has a crudely drawn, frowny face, and the words, "Keep out official HOA business in progress." "Brenda!" I roar, fighting my way through the miniature tsunami that is now our street. The wind snatches my voice and flings it into the tempest. "Are you clinically insane? The pump! We need to turn on the pump!" She looks up, her expression one of mild annoyance, as if I've just interrupted her during a particularly riveting game of solitaire. "It's not time yet, Michael," she shrieks back, her voice a thin, reedy counterpoint to the storm's bass growl. My projections, based on the latest almanac readings and the migratory patterns of the lesser spotted warbler, indicate the optimal activation window is in precisely 26 minutes. We must conserve operational energy. "Conserve energy?" I scream, incredulous. The water is now greedily licking at my knees. "Brenda, my prized collection of slightly tipsy garden gnomes are currently embarking on an unscheduled aquatic migration down Oak Street. Your projections are about to be very, very damp and possibly eaten by an alligator." From the relative and rapidly diminishing safety of Brenda's porch, Prince Fluffybutt, her over-pampered poodle, lets out a series of high-pitched, terrified yaps. Even the dog, whose brain is roughly the size of a walnut, seems to grasp the severity of the situation better than its owner. I reach the pump house, or rather, the small, rapidly shrinking island of concrete on which it stands. I grab the handle of Bessie's reinforced steel door and rattle it with all my might. It's locked. Locked tighter than Brenda's grip on the HOA budget. "Brenda, for the love of all that is holy and currently dry, open this door and give me the damn keys," I yell, my face inches from hers, the rain a cold, stinging curtain between us. She actually tuts at me. A small, sharp, disapproving sound, lost almost immediately in the wind's howl. Unauthorized access to critical community infrastructure is a Class C violation of the Sunny Pines HOA covenant, Michael. I direct you to page 78, Addendum K, paragraph 3, subsection 21. And then, the horrifying thought, colder and wetter than the rain now seeping into the waistband of my supposedly waterproof pants, dawns on me. It's not just that she's refusing to turn on the pump. She's actively making sure no one else can either. "Brenda," I say, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that even I barely recognize. "Where are the keys?" The wind seems to pause, just for a fraction of a second, as if holding its breath. She clutches her fanny pack, that cursed laminated fanny pack, to her chest like a shield. "The keys are safeguarded, Michael, in a secure, undisclosed, multi-redundant, off-site fanny pack." "Off-site fanny pack?" I splutter, gesturing wildly at the nylon monstrosity strapped around her waist. "It's on your person, you absolute blithering spoon. It's more on-site than my rapidly flooding basement. Just give them to me." Suddenly, a new figure emerges from the deluge, splashing through the knee-deep water like a determined, Ziploc-wielding guardian angel. It's Mrs. Rodriguez, from number 42, directly opposite the pump house. She's a quiet woman, usually keeps to herself, but I've always suspected she sees more than she lets on. Tonight she's got her smartphone held aloft, safely encased in not one, but 2 Ziploc bags. "Mikey! Mr. Pardlowski!" she calls out, her voice surprisingly strong. "I saw her this morning, when the sky was just looking a little bit miffed, you know? Before the real rain started. She came out here to the pump house. She was fiddling with the lockbox. And then she took the main keys out of the box. And she put in a different padlock, a new one. I saw her do it. I got pictures." She waves her Ziploc-bagged phone triumphantly, water streaming off it. The pieces of Brenda's insane puzzle click into place with a sickening, squelching thud. She didn't just change a combination. She physically removed the only accessible keys to Bessie. She's swapped out the communal lockbox with her own private, Brenda-only system. She has, in effect, stolen the keys to our salvation, all to maintain her iron-fisted, fanny-pack-fueled grip on power. I turn back to Brenda, my face a mask of slowly dawning, horrified disbelief. Fury, cold and sharp, is starting to bubble up through the fear. "You didn't just secure them, Brenda," I say, my voice dangerously quiet now. The wind seems to whip my words away, but I know she hears me. "You stole them. Mrs. Rodriguez has time-stamped high-definition photographic evidence of your grand larceny of vital, communally owned, flood prevention paraphernalia. Brenda's golf umbrella, which has been valiantly fighting a losing battle against Zephyr's gusts, finally gives up the ghost. It inverts with a pathetic, mournful pop, then rips itself from her grasp and sails away into the gray maelstrom like a very sad, pointy bat. She doesn't even flinch. "It's proactive asset management, Michael," she retorts, rainwater dripping from the end of her nose and forming a small, defiant puddle on her upper lip. To prevent unsanctioned pump fiestas. Unsanctioned pump fiestas. The water is now swirling angrily around my thighs, tugging at me with surprising strength. I can feel small pieces of debris bumping against my legs. My carefully cultivated zen is officially on vacation, probably somewhere high and dry. "Brenda," I say, my voice as cold and hard as the rain lashing my face. "You have precisely 60 seconds to produce those keys, or I am going to start my own fiesta. And trust me, it will be highly unsanctioned. And you are most definitely not invited. 60 seconds. It ticks by in a series of increasingly frantic heartbeats and the relentless, deafening roar of Hurricane Zephyr. Brenda just stands there, rain plastering her graying hair to her skull, that look of mulish, infuriating defiance cemented on her face. The water is an angry, churning brown soup now, carrying leaves, branches, and what looks suspiciously like one of my thematically inconsistent garden gnomes, doing a surprisingly speedy backstroke towards the Gulf of Mexico. My brain, which feels like it's been put in a cocktail shaker with a handful of angry hornets, is frantically cycling through options. Option A, continue to reason with the manifestly unreasonable. Status, epic fail. Option B, resort to physical persuasion. Tackle her. Wrestle the fanny pack of doom from her surprisingly strong grip. Tempting, I won't lie, but Sarah would file for divorce, citing aggravated assault on an HOA official with a laminated accessory as grounds. Plus, Brenda probably has some kind of secret HOA-approved martial art involving weaponized clipboards and a surprisingly vicious poodle. Option C, accept our fate. Learn to breathe underwater. Develop a taste for algae. Start a new civilization with the surviving garden gnomes. Status: suboptimal. And then, like a bolt of lightning from a particularly sarcastic god, Option D illuminates my waterlogged brain. The nuclear option. The "are you actually, certifiably, out of your ever-loving mind, Mikey?" option. The beautiful, the absurd, the exquisitely over-the-top option. Time for another flashback, folks. Because my life, apparently, is a series of increasingly bizarre encounters that somehow, improbably, lead to useful, if slightly unhinged, connections. Years ago, long before Sarah, long before Sunny Pines, long before my current existential battle with a power-mad HOA president, I was, for reasons that are still slightly fuzzy and possibly involved a regrettable amount of tequila, a judge at the annual 5-alarm chili cook-off and armadillo race extravaganza down in El Paso, Texas. Don't ask. Seriously, just don't. It involved a case of mistaken identity. They thought I was a renowned chili critic from Bon Appetit. I think my biggest culinary claim to fame at that point was being able to make minute rice in 58 seconds. A runaway 9-banded armadillo named Speedy Gonzales II, and a 5-star battle-hardened U.S. Army general who nearly choked to death on my signature Mikey's Magma Mouth Surprise chili. His name was General Norman Schlesinger. Old school. Tough as a $2 steak. Built like a brick outhouse with a bad attitude. After accidentally, I swear I thought the ghost peppers were mild bell peppers, the lighting was terrible, saved him from asphyxiation by chili via a slightly unorthodox but surprisingly effective Heimlich maneuver involving a nearby souvenir cactus. He'd clapped me on the back hard enough to realign my spine, coughed up a small, still smoldering jalapeno, and growled, "Son, you're a damn fool, but you're a lucky damn fool. You ever find yourself in a situation so foobar that's fouled up beyond all recognition for you civilian types, that only an act of God or the full might of the United States military can fix it? You call this number." He'd scrawled a phone number on a chili-stained napkin with a stubby pencil. "Just, for the love of all that's holy, don't ever make chili for me, or anyone I know, ever again." I'd laminated that napkin, kept it in my wallet for years, tucked right next to a picture of Lily dressed as a potato for her preschool play. You know, for emergencies. Back in the present, the water is now dangerously close to fanny pack altitude on Brenda. I look at her. I look at the rising tide of our impending doom. I look at my soggy, prune-like fingers. "Brenda?" I say, my voice eerily calm, a stark contrast to the shrieking chaos around us. "This is your final, no takebacks, cross my heart and hope to not drown warning. Keys, now. Or I make a phone call that will redefine the term escalation for this entire, rapidly diminishing landmass we call a zip code." Brenda actually scoffs. A wet, dismissive, utterly infuriating sound. "Oh, Michael, please! Who are you possibly going to call that will make a blind bit of difference now? The Little Mermaid? Your local city councilman who still thinks your primary complaint is about the aggressive territoriality of the neighborhood pigeons?" That's it. The last straw. The camel's back is not just broken. It's been pulverized into a fine sandy dust. Gloves are off. Or, in this specific, increasingly aquatic instance, wallet is out. I pull out the laminated, chili-stained napkin, shielding my phone from the relentless downpour with my body. 2 minutes. That's the self-imposed deadline I give myself. 2 minutes to attempt to convince General Schlesinger's people that a suburban HOA dispute orchestrated by a woman whose primary weapon is a fanny pack and a pathological adherence to outdated bylaws somehow qualifies as a legitimate national emergency. My fingers, numb with cold and adrenaline, manage to punch in the sacred numbers. "Actually, Brenda," I say, the phone pressed to my ear, a slow, slightly manic grin spreading across my face. "Think bigger. Think guys with much, much bigger boats, and possibly government-issued waiters." The line connects. A voice on the other end answers, sounding like a cement mixer gargling rusty nails. "Schlesinger, who the hell is this, and why in God's name are you using the Armageddon line on a Tuesday?" "Sir," I begin, trying to inject a note of calm, authoritative desperation into my voice. "It's Michael Partlowski. The chili guy? From the El Paso incident? Listen, I've got a Code Neptune situation developing down here in Sunny Pines, Florida. That's Neptune, as in the god of the sea, who is currently attempting to reclaim my front lawn." A long, pregnant pause on the other end, punctuated by what sounds suspiciously like General Schlesinger chewing on the unlit end of a very large cigar. "Partlowski?" the gravelly voice finally rumbles. "The human weapon of mass chili destruction? I thought you were in the Federal Witness Protection Program after that unfortunate Salsa Inferno incident at the Des Moines Fair." "Long story, sir," I say, glancing nervously at the water, which is now attempting to make friends with my belt buckle. "But right now, I've got a hostile domestic entity, name of Brenda, Brenda, who has commandeered critical flood defense infrastructure. We're talking imminent catastrophic inundation, sir, widespread property damage, possible gnome casualties, requesting immediate, and if I may be so bold, amphibious assistance." Another pause. Longer this time. I can almost hear the general's synapses firing, trying to compute the sheer unadulterated absurdity of my request. "Brenda, you say?" he finally grunts. "Is she armed? Hostile intent?" "Armed with a fanny pack of untold power, and an iron will that would make a drill sergeant weep, sir," I reply, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "And possibly glitter. It's complicated. But the water, sir, is decidedly not complicated. It's just very, very wet, and rising." "Glitter, you say?" Schlesinger mutters, a note of something that might be horrified fascination in his voice. "Damn it, Partlowski, you always find the weird ones." "All right, consider my cages rattled. Sit tight. Or, float. I'll dispatch someone from the Army Corps of Engineers. They're usually up for a bit of unconventional problem-solving. And Partlowski?" "Sir," I ask, hope blooming in my chest like a stubborn, waterproof flower. "You still owe me a new pair of combat boots. The ones I was wearing that day in El Paso. They never quite recovered from that chili." Click. I lower the phone, a strange sense of calm washing over me. It's done. The die is cast. The metaphorical and possibly literal boats are launched. Brenda is staring at me, her mouth slightly agape, a mixture of contempt, disbelief, and dawning, horrified confusion swirling in her rain-lashed eyes. "You were talking to your mother, weren't you, Michael?" she says, her voice a little shaky now. "Trying to get her to come down here and scold me for not sharing my toys?" "Not exactly, Brenda," I say, a slow, triumphant, and possibly slightly unhinged grin spreading across my face. "Think more. Uncle Sam. And he's not happy about your current asset management strategy. Especially the glitter." I hang up the phone, a strange, almost giddy sense of calm washing over me. It's done. The die is cast. The metaphorical and possibly soon-to-be literal boats have been launched. Or, more accurately, the very large olive-drab amphibious trucks. Brenda is staring at me, her mouth slightly agape, a fascinating cocktail of contempt, disbelief, and dawning, horrified confusion swirling in her rain-lashed eyes. You were talking to your mother, weren't you, Michael? She says, her voice a little shaky now, the wind stealing some of its usual cast-iron certainty. Trying to get her to come down here and scold me for not sharing my toys with the other children? Not exactly, Brenda, I say, a slow, triumphant, and possibly slightly unhinged grin spreading across my face. Think more. Uncle Sam. And he's not particularly thrilled about your current asset management strategy, especially the part involving the glitter and the potential for catastrophic multi-million-dollar flood damage. The next 15 minutes are a surreal eternity. The water, which was merely flirting with my kneecaps, is now making serious advances towards my thighs. It's an angry, churning brown soup, carrying an increasingly bizarre assortment of suburban detritus. Leaves, branches, a deflated soccer ball, what looks suspiciously like Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning, and now tragically ex-prize-winning, begonia. And, yes, another one of my garden gnomes. This one doing a rather impressive, if involuntary, freestyle stroke. Brenda, meanwhile, has retreated to muttering about delusional private citizens, frivolous and vexatious emergency calls, and the inherent structural integrity of well-maintained fanny packs. Prince Fluffybutt, from his rapidly shrinking island of porch, is yipping like a tiny, fluffy alarm system that's fatally short-circuiting. Then, a new sound, deeper than the wind's banshee shriek, more rhythmic and purposeful than the relentless drumming of the rain. A thrumming, a heavy, mechanical, ground-shaking thrumming. It's getting closer. Headlights, big ones, slice through the downpour. Not just headlights, searchlights, the kind that usually herald the arrival of either a rock concert or a military intervention. Two enormous olive-drab trucks, the kind you normally see on the Discovery Channel carrying tanks or possibly small, prefabricated countries, are fording the impromptu river that used to be Oak Street. They're not driving through the water. They're conquering it, their massive tires churning up rooster tails of muddy spray, their engines a defiant, guttural roar against the storm's fury. On the side of each, in big, stark white letters that seem to glow with an almost holy light, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Brenda's jaw, which had been set in a line of stubborn defiance, drops. Her meticulously laminated "Do Not Disturb Official HOA Business in Progress" sign, which she'd somehow managed to retrieve and was clutching like a sacred relic, slips from her numb fingers and is instantly swallowed by the churning floodwaters, disappearing without a trace, presumably off to laminate the underside of a manatee somewhere. The lead truck, a deuce and a half that looks like it eats smart cars for breakfast and washes them down with diesel fuel, plows to a halt beside us, its wake nearly knocking Brenda off her sensible, orthopedic-soled feet. The passenger door swings open with a purposeful, metallic clang, and a figure in full military-grade rain gear, looking impossibly calm, dry, and in charge, hops down into the thigh-deep water as if it's merely a slightly inconvenient puddle. He's tall, broad-shouldered, and his face, shadowed by the brim of his helmet, is all no-nonsense angles. Major Thompson, I presume. He strides towards me, each step purposeful, the water parting before him as if reluctantly acknowledging a superior authority. Major Thompson extends a gloved hand, his voice calm, clear, and authoritative, cutting through the storm's roar with surprising ease. Mr. Partlowski? Major Thompson, Army Corps of Engineers. General Schlesinger sends his, colorful regards. And a rather cryptic message about Chile, an international incident, and a debt involving a new pair of boots? Now, what's this about a rogue HOA president and a critical flood pump that's apparently decided to take an unscheduled and potentially catastrophic vacation? I shake his hand. A wave of immense, giddy relief washing over me, almost as powerful as the floodwaters currently trying to give me an impromptu enema. "Major," I say, my voice hoarse but filled with a newfound, slightly manic joy. "You, sir, are a sight for sore and very, very wet eyes. She's the one." I gesture towards Brenda, who is now staring at the 2.5 with the horrified fascination of someone witnessing the actual, literal kraken emerging from their prize-winning rose bushes, who looks like her pet poodle just staged a successful military coup and is currently redecorating the White House in shades of aggressively beige. Brenda, sputtering like a damp, faulty firework, finally finds her voice. "This is an outrage!" she shrieks, her voice cracking with indignation. "I am the duly elected, board-certified, and covenant-empowered president of the Sunny Pines Homeowners Association. You have no authority here. I demand to see your permits and your environmental impact study and a notarized letter from your mother." Major Thompson turns his gaze upon Brenda. It's not a hostile gaze, not exactly. It's more the kind of look a patient entomologist might give a particularly puzzling and possibly slightly venomous insect. He doesn't even blink. The rain just seems to slide off his helmet, defeated. "Ma'am," he says, his voice still impossibly calm, "when a federally declared disaster is in progress, and civilian lives and property are at imminent risk due to compromised critical infrastructure, such as, for example, a vital flood pump being held hostage by, shall we say, overzealous local administrative protocols, we, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, become the authority. And our permit, ma'am, is generally signed by the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces. Now, about these keys." From his porch, which is now looking more like a pier, Mr. Henderson lets out a wild, triumphant whoop that's surprisingly robust for an octogenarian. He pumps his fist in the air. Sarah, peeking from our doorway, a dish towel clutched in her hand, just slowly shakes her head, a bewildered, almost proud smile playing on her lips. Lily, my 7-year-old, has her nose pressed so hard against the storm-streaked window pane, she's practically part of the glass, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and what I can only describe as pure, unadulterated, holy cow dad called in the actual army awe. This, I think, as Major Thompson's team of highly efficient, very serious-looking engineers begins to deploy from the back of the trucks with an alarming array of heavy-duty equipment, is definitely going to be a core memory for the kid. And possibly for the entire neighborhood. And almost certainly for Brenda's therapist. Brenda, bless her stubborn, waterlogged, and possibly now slightly mildewed cotton socks, is not a woman who yields easily. Or, ever. Even when faced with 2 5-ton military trucks, a platoon of determined-looking engineers who clearly skipped charm school in favor of advanced applied hydraulics, and a major who looks like he eats red tape for breakfast, she refuses to surrender the keys. "They are vital HOA assets," she proclaims, clutching the fanny pack to her chest as if it contains the nuclear launch codes and the last dodo egg. "Entrusted to my personal, highly secure, fanny pack-based stewardship. You can't just requisition them. It's against the bylaws." Section 17, subsection D, paragraph 9. Unauthorized commandeering of communal accoutrements. Major Thompson sighs, a sound that is surprisingly audible over the wind, which is still having a Category 4 tantrum. It's the sigh of a man who has dealt with one too many Brendas in his career. "All right, Sergeant," he says into his radio, his voice betraying just a hint of weariness. "Looks like we're going to Plan Bravo. Get Big Tony on the comms. Tell him it's another Code Karen." He'll know what to do. A Code Karen? Apparently, Brenda isn't as unique a specimen as I'd feared, or perhaps hoped. There's a certain grim comfort in knowing your particular brand of suburban nightmare is a recognized, quantifiable phenomenon within the U.S. military-industrial complex. Moments later, as if summoned by a particularly powerful incantation involving the words stubborn, bureaucrat, and imminent disaster, another vehicle, even more imposing and frankly terrifying than the first two, rumbles onto the scene. It's a massive flatbed truck, bristling with winches, cranes, and what looks suspiciously like a battering ram, albeit a very technologically advanced battering ram. It's a mobile workshop from hell, or possibly just from a very specialized government auction. Emblazoned on the side, Big Tony's 24-hour emergency access and aggravation abatement services. If it's locked, we're not. Big Tony himself, a man who looks like he was carved from a very large, very angry oak tree, and then given a welding torch and a can-do attitude, hops out. He's built like a grizzly bear that swallowed a toolbox. He nods curtly to Major Thompson. Then his gaze falls upon Brenda, who is now attempting to read Major Thompson his Miranda rights from a soggy, handwritten index card. "Another one, Major?" Big Tony rumbles, his voice like a gravel truck driving over a pile of corrugated iron. "Seriously? What is it with these HOAs and their Napoleonic complexes during natural disasters? Did this one also try to requisition your amphibious assault vehicles for a neighborhood bake sale, claiming it was for community outreach?" Major Thompson manages a weary smile. "This one's a special vintage, Tony. Took the pump keys hostage, and there's a rumor involving glitter and a bedazzler." Big Tony runs a hand the size of a small ham over his grizzled beard, his eyes, surprisingly shrewd and intelligent, inspecting Bessie's reinforced steel door and Brenda's new, defiant little padlock. "Glitter, huh? Classy. Amateurs. Give me 5 minutes and a can of industrial-grade lubricant, Major. 10 if she tries to cite any more imaginary bylaws at me or attempts to weaponize that fanny pack." Just then, as if the universe decided this particular brand of chaotic opera needed another chorus, the local police finally arrive. 2 patrol cars, their sirens a pathetic, wheezing counterpoint to the hurricane's full-throated symphony, come splashing cautiously down the street. Officers Miller and Davis, looking like drowned rats in ill-fitting department-issue ponchos, emerge, their faces etched with a mixture of fear, bewilderment, and the dawning, horrified realization that this is going to be a lot of paperwork. Brenda, it turns out, in between attempts to laminate storm warnings and safeguard vital fanny pack assets, had managed to get a 911 call through. Her complaint, as far as I can piece together from Officer Miller's shell-shocked expression, involved unauthorized military occupation of a designated residential quiet zone, wanton destruction of HOA-approved locking mechanisms, and a disruptive citizen, one Michael Partlowski, inciting public insurrection with what appears to be a dangerously advanced knowledge of Chile-based conspiracies. Officer Miller approaches me, his eyes wide, his notepad already looking suspiciously damp. "Mr. Partlowski, we got a call, a rather enthusiastic call, something about the Army, and fanny packs, and a hostile takeover of a pump? Can you, perhaps shed some illuminating and preferably non-classified light on this aquatic apocalypse we seem to have stumbled into?" "Officer," I say, trying to sound like the calm, rational, entirely not responsible for summoning a small military force to my suburban cul-de-sac citizen I most definitely am. "It's quite simple, really. Hurricane, lots of it. Flood, very big. Pump needed to unflood. I gesture with my thumb towards Brenda, who is now attempting to serve Major Thompson with a handwritten eviction notice from Sunny Pines, apparently effective immediately, has decided the keys to said pump are better off enjoying a secure, undisclosed, and very dry vacation in her nylon hip satchel of doom. These fine, upstanding, and remarkably well-equipped gentlemen, from the United States Army Corps of Engineers, are merely here to perform a civic rescue, possibly with extreme prejudice against bad locks and glitter-based sabotage. Major Thompson, to his credit, handles the local constabulary with admirable professionalism. "Gentlemen," he says, his voice calm and steady, a rock of sanity in our sea of madness. "Federal disaster response. We're operating under a FEMA mandate. Happy to brief your captain in the morning, assuming we all haven't washed away to Key West by then. Right now, if you'd like to assist with crowd control, specifically controlling her." He nods almost imperceptibly at Brenda, who is now loudly questioning the structural integrity of Big Tony's beard. "That would be most appreciated. Otherwise, with all due respect, we've got this." Officers Miller and Davis exchange a long, meaningful look. It's the kind of look that clearly communicates, we are not paid nearly enough for this level of weird. This is above our pay grade, above our training, and possibly above the current water level. They wisely decide their best course of action is to monitor the situation from a safe and strategically advantageous position, which translates to retreating to the relative dryness of their patrol car, occasionally shining their flashlight at things in a vaguely official manner, and probably calling for a very, very strong pot of coffee. Meanwhile, Big Tony, who has clearly had enough of the bureaucratic foreplay, approaches Bessie's door with what looks like an oversized can opener designed for bank vaults. There's a moment of focused effort, a grunt, a screech of protesting metal, and then, with a satisfying, resounding crunch, the door to the pump house swings open. Brenda lets out a shriek that could curdle concrete, shatter glass, and possibly summon small, ill-tempered bats from the ether. "That's community property, you oversized, wrench-wielding vandal, vandalism, destruction of HOA assets. I'll have your stripes for this, Major, and your comically large can of industrial lubricant, Big Tony." Big Tony just grins, wiping a fleck of rust from his cheek. "Lady," he rumbles, "you ain't seen vandalism yet. Wait till you get my bill for emergency glitter removal and existential despair mitigation." The interior of the pump house is an experience. It's less critical infrastructure control room and more Brenda's crafting corner meets doomsday prepper's fever dream. Laminated instruction sheets, handwritten in Brenda's aggressively neat cursive, are taped to every available surface, often with arrows pointing in confusing and occasionally contradictory directions. There's a label maker, still proudly displaying, "Main power cutoff. Do not touch unless authorized by BLH FRC." Brenda L. Hothersall, flood response coordinator, naturally, stuck to the main breaker panel with what looks suspiciously like, "Major, sir?" one of the young engineers calls out, his voice a mixture of disbelief and horrified awe. He's holding up a small, sticky, and alarmingly sparkly metal component. You're not going to believe this. The manual override switch, it appears to be bedazzled and possibly superglued into the off position with some kind of high-tensile glitter adhesive." Major Thompson slowly removes his Kevlar helmet, running a hand through his short, damp hair. He looks like a man who has stared into the abyss, and the abyss has stared back, holding a glue gun and a fistful of rhinestones. "Bedazzled," he says, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. Of course, because in the middle of a Category 4, rapidly escalating to Category 5, hurricane, the first thing one worries about is whether one's emergency flood pump override is sufficiently fashion-forward and aesthetically pleasing. "Sergeant, get it operational, and somebody find me an aspirin, a very, very large aspirin." Brenda, who has somehow managed to slip past the beleaguered soldier at the door, who, to be fair, was probably momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity of the bedazzled override revelation, is now attempting to physically block the engineers from accessing the control panel. "It's a tamper-evident security feature," she wails, her voice cracking with a mixture of desperation and righteous indignation. "State of the art. I saw a tutorial on Pinterest. It's designed to prevent unauthorized tinkering." The soldier, a young man who looks barely old enough to shave but possesses the weary patience of a saint who has spent far too long dealing with particularly trying toddlers, gently but firmly takes Brenda by the arm and escorts her a few feet away, back towards the doorway. "Ma'am," he says, his voice surprisingly kind despite the circumstances. "With all due respect, I think a moderately determined raccoon armed with a toothpick and a vague understanding of leverage could bypass a bedazzled override. Please, let the professionals work, before we all start growing gills." The Army Corps engineers are, to put it mildly, miracle workers. They move with a quiet, focused efficiency that is both terrifying and deeply reassuring. Wires are reconnected, bedazzlements are carefully unbedazzled, a process that seems to involve a specialized toolkit and a lot of quiet cursing. Glitter glue is painstakingly, and mostly, scraped away. The air in the small pump house is thick with the smell of ozone, damp concrete, and the faint, lingering scent of Brenda's lavender-scented hand sanitizer. Then, the moment of truth. One of the engineers, a serious-looking woman with determined eyes, nods to Major Thompson. He nods back. She reaches out and hits a big, beautiful, gloriously unbedazzled green button. Bessie coughs. Once, twice. There's a hesitant, grinding sputter. My heart plummets. Is it too late? Has Brenda's reign of sparkly terror finally defeated us? And then, with a deafening, ground-shaking, utterly magnificent roar, Bessie springs to life. The giant diesel engine catches, settles into a steady, powerful rhythm, and the unmistakable, deeply satisfying thrum of thousands upon thousands of gallons of angry floodwater being sucked from our drowning streets and spat contemptuously into the already overflowing drainage canal fills the air. It's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard in my entire life, possibly including Lily's first giggle and the time Sarah told me I wasn't completely insane for buying that emergency ham radio. A ragged, spontaneous cheer erupts from the huddle of soggy, shivering neighbors who have gathered at a safe distance, watching the drama unfold from their porches and driveways. Even Officers Miller and Davis, from the relative dryness of their patrol car, honk their horn in a series of short, tentative but undeniably celebratory beeps. The water level in the street, which had been creeping up my thighs with alarming and unwelcome intent, visibly hesitates. It seems to quiver, confused, as if its relentless advance has just run headfirst into an invisible, immovable wall. Then, ever so slowly, miraculously, it begins to recede. Brenda, however, is a broken record of sputtering outrage. Her carefully constructed world of rules, regulations, and absolute fanny pack-based authority is crumbling around her, being washed away by the very floodwaters she was so confident she could control. She spots the original, communally owned keys to Bessie, which one of the engineers calmly extracts from her fanny pack, after a brief but surprisingly intense struggle involving a remarkably strong Velcro flap and what might have been a defensive deployment of a travel-sized lint roller. She makes a desperate, last-ditch lunge for them. "Those are mine!" she shrieks, her voice raw with a grief usually reserved for the loss of a beloved pet or a particularly lucrative Tupperware party. Evidence. Evidence of my meticulous organizational prowess, my unwavering dedication to procedural integrity. She slips on a patch of muddy, dislodged astroturf. Don't ask, it's Sunny Pines. There's always astroturf involved somewhere. her sensible orthopedic shoes losing their already tenuous grip on reality. Arms flailing like a malfunctioning windmill, she goes down in a heap, landing with a wet, ignominious squelch. The keys, liberated from her grasp, fly from her hand in a graceful, almost balletic arc through the stormy air, and land, with a soft plink, directly in a rapidly forming puddle that is currently being enthusiastically investigated by none other than Prince Fluffybutt. The poodle, who has somehow escaped the confines of Brenda's rapidly flooding porch and braved the hurricane's fury, possibly in search of a less hysterical overlord, in a rare and shocking display of initiative, not involving yapping at squirrels or attempting to assert dominance over inanimate garden objects, snatches the keys up in his tiny, surprisingly agile mouth. And then, with a jaunty little trot that speaks of pure, unadulterated canine glee, he trots over to Mr. Henderson's prize-winning, though now tragically waterlogged and debris-strewn, azalea bush, and with a series of vigorous, enthusiastic digging motions, promptly buries them with gusto. I swear even the wind seems to pause, just for a beat, in sheer dumbfounded appreciation of the comedic timing. Major Thompson, who has maintained an admirable, almost supernatural level of military composure throughout this entire debacle, actually lets out a short, sharp bark of laughter. He claps a hand over his mouth, but it's too late. The dam of his professionalism has cracked. The keys to Sunny Pine's salvation, recently liberated from the clutches of a tyrannical HOA president by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, are now safely interred beneath a traumatized azalea bush, courtesy of a poodle named Prince Fluffybutt. You just can't make this stuff up.